Winter had not yet released its grip on northern England. The civil war between the houses of York and Lancaster had passed beyond a struggle for the throne and become a fight to the death. After Lancaster's King Henry VI was overthrown and then restored, both sides understood clearly they could not coexist. Towton was not meant to gain advantage, but to end everything the losing side would be wiped out. Edward of York had just proclaimed himself King Edward IV, but his crown had value only if the Lancaster army was completely destroyed. The Lancaster forces, commanded by the Duke of Somerset, marched north with a single objective: crush the Yorkist army before Edward could consolidate power. The two armies met on open high ground near the village of Towton, in the middle of a snowstorm blowing against the wind. The moment the two sides made contact, there was no road back. The battlefield was a strip of rolling ground, trapped between Cockbeck Stream to the south, and the road leading to Towton in the north. The air was freezing, snow fell thick, and strong winds blew straight into the faces of the Lancastrians. Edward IV chose the higher ground, with the wind at his back. Somerset was forced to deploy in unfavorable conditions, but had no other choice. The Yorkists held the high slopes, their formation spread wide but with depth. Archers were pushed forward. Heavy infantry formed solid blocks behind them, ready to advance once the enemy was disordered. Edward stood in the line himself, not hidden behind clearly visible so his soldiers could see him. On the Lancaster side, the formation was denser and more numerous. They trusted in numbers. Somerset placed his archers opposite the enemy, with infantry behind them armed with long spears, axes, and swords. They knew they had to attack quickly, before weather and terrain eroded morale. As both sides settled their formations, the snowfall grew heavier. The wind screamed in gusts. No one ordered a delay. The battle began in deadly silence. Yorkist archers acted first. They stepped forward several dozen paces, braced themselves in the snowy mud, and drew their bows, the wind behind them. When the first volley was released, it did not merely fly, it was driven forward by the wind, burying itself deep into the Lancaster ranks. The Lancastrians immediately returned fire, but the headwind threw their arrows off course. They fell short and stuck harmlessly into the snow before the Yorkist lines. Broken shafts lay scattered across the white ground. York did not stop. They fired a second volley, then a third. Each volley was accurate, each volley killed. Lancaster began taking losses before they even reached the enemy. Somerset was forced to give the order to advance. If they stood still, they would be shot down rank by rank. As the Lancastrians moved forward, they had to pass over the arrows that had fallen short. The Yorkists saw this and did something ruthless but effective. They ordered their archers to stop firing, fall back, collect the missed Lancaster arrows, and shoot them back. By then the distance was too close for archery. Two masses of infantry collided in the snowstorm. The sound of metal striking metal was swallowed by the wind. Those who fell did not cry out for long, they were trampled immediately. Snow underfoot turned into red mud. The formations locked tight. No one could see the whole field, only the back of the man ahead and the enemy within arm's reach. Strikes were instinct. Defense was reflex. Edward IV personally pushed into the front line. His presence kept the Yorkist formation from breaking. On the Lancaster side, Somerset constantly urged his troops forward, trying to use numerical superiority to crush the enemy. A deadlock began. No side gave ground. No side won. The initial collision did not end quickly as either side had predicted. After the first impact, the two formations stuck together like two walls of flesh pressed tight within the snowstorm. There was no room left to maneuver. Every step forward meant stepping on bodies. Every step backward meant a chain collapse. At the center, the Lancastrians began to press hard. Their greater numbers allowed continuous rotation. When one man fell, another immediately filled the gap. The Yorkists were fewer. Their line began to thin. Snow hid the blood, but the smell of iron and ragged breath hung thick in the air. Both sides were no longer fighting in perfect formation, but in small clustered groups. Broken spears were thrown away. Axes and short swords were drawn. At half an arm's length, all technique vanished, only weight and stubborn endurance remained. Those who slipped on the snow were dragged down and stabbed repeatedly before they could stand. Lancaster believed they were winning. Pressure from the south forced the Yorkists gradually back toward the slope. Yorkist soldiers began to see Cockbeck behind them. If the formation broke, there would be no escape. Edward IV recognized the danger immediately. He did not shout long speeches. He moved straight to the most heavily pressured point, replacing exhausted men with his own guards. The king's direct presence prevented the center from collapsing. York did not advance, but they stopped being pushed back. The wind still blew against Lancaster. The snow thickened. The wounded left on the ground quickly froze to death if they had not already bled out. There were no prisoners. No one had time to take prisoners. The struggle lasted for hours. Both sides were exhausted. The Lancaster line began to stretch. Front units had been fighting too long without timely relief. They were still numerous, but cohesion between blocks loosened. At that moment, from the northeast, new movement appeared through the snow curtain. First dark shapes, then the clash of metal from the Lancaster flank. Yorkist reinforcements had arrived. The strike was not massive but precise. The fresh force slammed directly into the Lancaster right flank, where the formation was most stretched and fatigued. The Lancastrians there could not pivot in time. They were hit from the side and lost their defensive posture. Panic began to spread not across the whole army at once, but in fragments. One unit fell back and pulled the next with it. Gaps opened. York immediately drove into those openings with all remaining strength. Somerset tried to stabilize the line, but wind, snow, and screaming swallowed his orders. Those in the rear could not see why they should continue pushing when the front was in chaos. Pressure reversed. Lancaster shifted from attack to defense, and on slippery ground, defense meant being pushed back. Step by step, the Lancastrians were driven toward Cockbeck. When the front ranks reached the bank, everything shattered. Those behind kept pushing forward, unaware there was no ground left ahead. They slipped, fell into the freezing stream, and dragged others with them. The narrow stream became a killing pit. When the Lancaster front broke at Cockbeck,
the collapse did not happen gradually, it spread like a landslide. Soldiers in the front ranks slid into the knife-cold water,
dragged under by heavy armor. Those behind could not see and kept pushing by formation momentum. Layer upon layer of men piled into the narrow channel. The waters of Cockbeck changed color. Mud, melting snow, and blood mixed together. Those who did not drown were trampled or stabbed from the banks as they tried to climb out. No ranks remained, no command remained. Only desperate survival instinct. Above them, the Yorkists finally saw clear signs of victory. The moment the enemy turned their backs, Edward ordered a full advance. No complex formation, the entire Yorkist line surged downhill together, driving Lancaster straight into chaos. Soldiers who had fought for hours, though exhausted, poured out their last strength, striking the backs of the fleeing enemy. Lancaster tried to retreat toward Towton, but the only road was clogged by their own troops. Those who threw away their weapons ran faster, trampling fallen comrades. Anyone who stopped died. Anyone who turned back died. Units that tried to hold formation were swallowed by the fleeing mass and completely dissolved. The battle was no longer combat but pursuit and slaughter. The Yorkists gave no chance for regrouping. They hunted down small clusters and cut down anyone still bearing Lancaster colors. There was no order to take prisoners. Years of civil war had taught both sides that today's captive could be tomorrow's killer. Snow still fell, but the ground was no longer white. Bodies lay so thick they concealed the terrain itself. Depressions filled with corpses became natural traps. Those running behind fell in. Those ahead slipped back, forming inescapable heaps. Screams grew sparse, replaced by ragged breathing and the sound of water choked by bodies. Somerset and the Lancaster commanders lost all control. No more orders, no more rally points. Each man sought his own survival. But the field at Towton did not allow an orderly retreat. The only open path was the path of death. The pursuit lasted for miles. Even as the sun began to sink, the killing did not stop. Exhausted Lancastrians slipped in melting snow, were overtaken and killed on the spot. No resistance was required. Wearing the wrong colors was enough to die. When night fell, the battlefield became eerily silent. The wind still blew, but metal no longer rang. Edward halted his troops not from mercy, but because no organized enemy remained to kill. Towton did not end with a single decisive moment, but with the total destruction of an army. Lancaster did not merely lose, they were erased from the field. Survivors fled north in panic, carrying news of an unprecedented massacre. Towton became the bloodiest day in English history, not because of refined tactics, but because there was no retreat, no mercy, and no place for defeat. On that snow-covered field, the Civil War was temporarily decided by bodies.